Brothers and sister in Islam, first of all, let me say it's a privilege for me to be at this MANA conference, and may Allah Azza wa Jal grant us uh, rewards for leaving our families and coming here so that we may learn and, inshallah, bring our community closer together in the spirit of unity and harmony. I am the executive director of the Michigan branch of CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. My name is Dawood Walid. I'm also the assistant imam of Masjid Wali Muhammad in Detroit, Michigan, formerly known as Temple Number 1 in the times of the Nation of Islam. And in 1975, my beloved late teacher, Imam Warathuddin Muhammad, rahmatullahi alayh, renamed this masjid. This was the first masjid, actually, he renamed. He named it after his uncle, Wali Muhammad, who, when Elijah Muhammad was locked up by the federal government on some bogus charges that he had evaded the draft, even though he was in his I believe it was late 40s. But because of his teachings at the time, the government locked him up, and it was his brother, Wali Muhammad, who looked after the family and made sure that the Nation of Islam at that time didn't fall apart. I'm going to go back and revisit the theme of this topic and just go into a little bit differently than Brother Jamil, and maybe bring a little more controversy to this topic, which I don't mind doing. But the topic says, forging a political agenda, discussion on what the political agenda for MANA, indigenous Muslims, and American Muslims should be. Obviously, the first thing this topic implies is that we do not have a coherent political agenda as a community, and this is true. We do not have a coherent political agenda. Not only for MANA, but we look at it as an indigenous Muslim community, and this is obviously also acknowledging that there are certain socio-political factors within indigenous Muslim life that differ from immigrant Muslims. This is loaded within the title of this discussion, and American Muslims in general. From a Quranic perspective, I would just like to remind us of a verse in the Quran, in Surah Al-Hujurat, this is the 13th ayah, where Allah Azza wa Jal says, بَعْدَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَىٰ وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا لِتَعَارَفُوا. This verse is, O mankind, O people, surely we have created you from one male and one female and made you into various nations and tribes, لِتَعَارَفُوا, in order that you may get to know one another. This ayah should be is divine guidance for us, a reminder. What we see in our lives every day is that we do have differences amongst the family of man, and that this is something that has been ordained by our Lord, Allah Azza wa Jal. And within these differences, Allah has given us the capacity to have various levels of group affinity, and has placed within inside the nature of human beings for human beings to have, we could say, different political sensitivities based upon their backgrounds and their environments. This is something that's natural. This is something for us that we need to understand. And Allah Azza wa Jal created this diversity, li ta'arafu, in order that we may recognize each other's interests so that we can come together to bring about a common agenda for the benefit of all mankind in regards to our reverence and obedience to our Creator, Allah Azza wa Jal. This is something that we should look at. I would like to, for the purposes of MANA, as how I understand MANA, and all of us look at MANA differently, but this is a national alliance. It's an organization. The mission of this organization in and of itself is not to be involved directly in political advocacy or lobbying. That's not the purpose of MANA. It's a forum for us to get together based upon our different group orientations, and we know that there's no such thing as a unified indigenous Muslim community. There are very different subgroups. African Americans who have the more Salafi persuasion, Jamaat al-Tabligh, people who affiliate themselves with the Imam Wafdi Muhammad's community, Shadhali, Tijani, as Dr. Sherman Jackson calls independents, etc. So we have a lot of diversity in amongst, we have African American Shia. We have a lot of diversity in amongst ourselves. But we have to first look at what are we basing our agenda upon? We as Muslims, we have human concerns for all humanity. More closely, we have concerns for our ummah, Ummatul Islamiyah. With inside of this, the human concerns and the concerns of our ummah, we have international concerns, national, and we can also say tribal or local issues. So there's a different gamut, and all of these things need to be addressed in balance. The former Speaker of the House, the late Tip O'Neill, who's a Democrat, he was Speaker of the House for quite a long time. He's coined of saying a very famous saying of all politics is local. And what I'm suggesting for us that when we discuss our political agenda, I think that we should start at the grassroots and start at our very localized agendas. What is affecting us on the local level? What are those issues that are affecting us in our direct communities, the counties that we live in, and municipalities? In the history, I would say in the last few decades with the Muslim community, and this is part of the reasoning of organizing a group such as MAD to begin with, is that we saw that because we didn't get together and draw a coherent agenda in recognizing all of these various factors, all of these various issues, a lot of the community's political aspirations and advocacy really didn't deal with situations in a balanced way that address certain issues that, that affect indigenous Muslims. For the most part, a lot of our political advocacy historically in the last 3 decades was more so about international affairs, overseas issues, and then these were dubbed as the Islamic issues or the Muslim issues. And those issues that affected people in urban areas where indigenous Muslims live, these somehow issues weren't labeled or dubbed Islamic enough or Muslim enough. Hence, for example, we just heard Imam Talib talk about the broken homes that are in, that affect the African American community, and certain residual effects that take place from these broken homes, such as inner city crime, drug use through these broken homes, higher levels or percentages of the spreading of sexually transmitted diseases, so on and so forth, higher levels of high school dropouts, which then leads to areas where there's a lower tax base and inferior schools, etc. In areas where Muslims lived, these issues have not been traditionally dubbed as Muslim or enough or Islamic enough, of issues traditionally that our community has placed a lot of effort in addressing and setting a platform and actually having a discourse and giving dalil from the Quran and the Sunnah of how we address these issues in a larger community context. Going back to the local issues, let me also, sometimes, I've also heard this too in regards to MADA specifically, but even when I bring up sometimes these issues, that it is true that in urban areas or indigenous Muslims who live in certain areas deal with different issues outside of suburban Muslims, and these need to be addressed. We then get charged of sometimes being charged with being nationalistic or being tribalistic. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam was asked by a companion, "Amin al-asabiyati yuhibbu rajulu qawma." This is the question. This is in Tirmidhi and Sunan Abi Dawud, this hadith that I'm referencing. Is it from tribalism or racism that a man loves his people? This question he's asked. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "La, walakin min al-asabiyati." He said it is from tribalism or racism. Tu'inu rajulu ala qawm قوم على ذو. This is the rest.